Hello, I'm Javis Lewis and welcome back in our series about Storyist, the creative writing application for macOS and iOS. In this episode, I'm going to talk about story sheets. Story sheets are a writing aid that help channel your diffuse thoughts and make them kind of help you solidify them on paper. So story sheets were a little bit difficult for me to understand at first, and it took me years to grasp the concept of how this can improve my writing, and now I actually like them. So a very good concept, but it's tough to explain because it's on one hand it's just kind of a file that you create, but at the same time it really hones your fantasy in and makes you write down the more important things about your story. So to give you an abstract overview of story sheets, they are a way to define a thing in more solid terms. So a thing such as a character, a plot point, a scene, a setting, that sort of thing. So imagine a kind of part of a manuscript where you have one character, Dave, and you have another character, Mary, and the two of them meet in a coffee shop and they're discussing a breakup. And now Dave wants to break up, but Mary says, actually, no, let's not do that. I think we should stay together. So Dave's kind of flustered and thought, yeah, I'm going to make a drastic decision in my life. I'm going to dump Mary. Mary says, you're not dumping me. We're going to stay together. So it's kind of crazy. That's, Now Dave gets a phone call by his boss who wants to fire him from the Dharma Initiative. So that could be part of our story. That's not the whole story, but this is a part. And those are 5 things that we're defining here. We're defining a character, we're defining another character, we're defining a setting or a scene in which this whole thing takes place. And then we're defining a plot point in which Dave wants to dump Mary, and then we're defining another plot point in which Dave gets fired from the Dharma Initiative. So those are the 5 things that we do potentially have a lot to say about, and we want to define them. So what does the coffee shop look like? What does Dave look like? What does Mary look like? What's this plot point about? How important is it to the overall story arc, and so forth? And that's where story sheets can help us with. And Storyist makes that easy because it kind of interlinks one thing with another. So a character, for example, grows over the arc of a story, and those kind of plot points can help define the growth of a character. So let's have a look at how stories can help us hone those things in and put those things on paper. On the bottom left hand side here, I get this little plus icon, and I've shown you this in the images video already. We can define a story sheet. And when we do that, a little dialog comes up here and it lets us choose what we want to define. So those are the things I was talking about that are kind of difficult to describe unless you have a concrete idea about them. So a character, for example, let's start with that. Choose a character and let's call him Dave Lee. There we go. That's our first character. And we can describe the character here. So for example, give him a summary. Dave works for the Dharma Initiative, although based off the island. You can give him the description here, physical description, say he's 37 and he's male and his eye color is, green, and his hair color is undefined. Many of our hair colors are undefined. Build, we'll say couch potato. There we go. And now we get to the character development points. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in more detail, but for now the template gives you a little description of what this is all about. So click on this little comedie tragedie icon here to define a character point. And a character point is currently unassigned. There's just one thing that's called unassigned, and we're going to talk about that more in a moment. So right now we can say wants to break up with Mary, and that's one thing we can define. And then we can define another character development point where perhaps we'll say add a character point and we'll say gets fired from the Dharma Initiative there. And obviously you can have as many character points as you like. You can define these things as well. You can take notes about your character. So, go crazy and just put everything about your character in one place. That's what this is really designed for. So this little icon here can also be replaced with an image. I've showed you images earlier. We can kind of, maybe drag Dave Lee close up into here. I don't even know this person. I'm so sorry if you happen to be watching this and I'm using your photo. I don't even know who you are, but it's one of those things. It kind of demonstrates a purpose, or maybe we can say me on webcam. So this is what Dave Lee looks like, for example. So that defines the character, and it's kind of a way to start writing a Bible about your character. Now imagine we can define another character. So let's grab another story sheet here. And we're going to call that character, say, Mary Brickle. There we go. That's her. And perhaps we'll use this as Mary's avatar. And let's define Mary as she works in a bookstore but has dreams of becoming an actress and move to Hollywood. How about that? Physical description, perhaps she is, 32, she is female, her eye color is blue, and her hair color is blonde. And her build is, slim. So her development point can be one that is shared with Dave, for example. So I'm going to show you how to link that in a moment. But those are this is how you can put information about a character into one place and keep that there. You can keep these things handy while you're writing by using the side-by-side editor view. So up here, you can choose the side-by-side editor views. And then in one hand, let me just close that inspector down under View, Inspector, Hide Inspector. That'll get rid of that pane. And then we can have two things side by side, one of which could be our character sheet. Perhaps I'll keep that here. And in here, we can keep our manuscript handy. And now I can describe that character, and when I click into here, I can then go and switch to a different character, or I can switch to a plot point. And if I ever need to reference whatever this character is about, I can then go and have a look at that. And oh yeah, actually she likes, goldfish, and he likes, Coca-Cola or something like that. So that's what this is really useful for. So you can take notes about a character and then write about him or her. So that's what that's, for. Let me head back over to the single editor view, and perhaps I'll switch the inspector back. Oh no, actually I'm just going to keep everything as it is. And I'm going to define a couple of other story sheets here. So to stick with our example, perhaps we should define the coffee shop in which the breakup scene takes place. So let's choose this one here, the setting. And you can see that these come with different little icons. So characters have this icon here, the two masks, the two character masks, and the setting template has this little, theater light on there. So it's, it's kind of cool to visualize what these things are. And of course you can put them into folders. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So let's say this is the coffee shop. Notice that when I type that here and hit return, coffee shop, the title is also being taken into here. So that's kind of nice way of keeping that together. So again, we can replace that with an image here if we wanted to. I don't really know if I have anything appropriate here. I don't think I have, so maybe I'll just use this. And imagine that's not the WordPress logo. Imagine that's the branding of the coffee shop, perhaps. There we go. So summarize what the coffee shop is all about. Your average neighborhood coffee shop like the one on 10th and West Avenue, for example. And you can add the sights and sound and the smell, and of course you can take some notes here. See these as templates to get you started. So setting details, for example, we have sights, sounds, and smells, but you may find that you want to define other important aspects about your settings or your characters or your scenes or whatever, in which case you can hover over these things. When it turns blue, you can click on it and you can either remove this field, so smells is a field in here, or you can add another field here and then define that yourself. So perhaps in settings you want something like, the number of parking spaces that are around there, or you want to define whatever the lighting is like there, or something like that, so you can make that your own, and you can save these things as your own templates as well. So see this as something that can get you started, and you can go as crazy about it as you like. Let's define one more story sheet here. and in which case this is a plot point. And the plot point in my case is the break up. My goodness, the break up. There we go. You can define here what's supposed to happen. Dave wants to break up with Mary, but Mary won't let him do that. There we go. So again, you can put details here and notes here, but one thing that I wanted to make you aware of is that this thing now says section sheet unassigned. So a section sheet is exactly the same template with a few other things perhaps, but it will allow you to define a section of your manuscript that you're writing. So you can define all kinds of things and just put down on paper what you'd like that section or that scene or that character or that setting to be about, and then keep it as a handy reference as a notebook. Some people, if you're writing with Word or Pages, you have to use two different programs for that. You maybe have your iOS or your Apple Notes application on the same screen open as the actual writing application. And Storyist allows you to combine these things together. But Storyist, again, goes one step further and allows you to link these things with each other. Let me show you how that works. To show you this, I'm going to create one more story sheet, and this is going to be a scene sheet. There we go. I can have a scene sheet or a section sheet, doesn't really matter. I'm going to use a scene sheet so that we can visualize in this scene, this is what happens. So let me do that. Untitled scene sheet 2, and I'll say the break up, for example. So we have a plot point called break up, but we also have a scene that's called break up. We could also call it something else. Maybe I will actually call it break up and getting fired, just so that I know what's happening in this scene. And yes, I've misspelled that, so thank you for pointing that out there, Storyist. So in this scene, we can say Dave and Mary meet at the coffee shop. Dave isn't allowed to break up with Mary, and on top of it, he gets fired. Obviously, in a real novel, this would be way more exciting. So we have a few things that we can do here. POF character. If we click on that, we can say that is Dave, for example. So if I start typing Dave, then Storyist is trying to autocomplete that. So the first couple of characters will be enough for it to bring this up. So I can just hit return, and then Dave Lee is going to be a link. So the concept here is that if I wanted to know who's breaking up with who again, what's this character about, then with this link, I can literally click on it, and then I go to Dave Lee's character sheet. And imagine this again, this is open in the other window. That means for demonstration purposes here, the side-by-side editor views. In here, we're having our manuscript or our screenplay, and on the right hand side here we have the character sheet open. So I can now say, oh yeah, so I need to write about Dave. Dave does this, and then I can say, what's this scene all about? The coffee shop. And I can go to the coffee shop, and then I can say, hey, actually now I need to write about Mary. So what's Mary all about? And I can kind of switch to that if and when I need to, and then keep writing about that scene. That's a good writing aid, a good writing help there. So that's why the side-by-side editor view is really helpful there. But just for demonstration purposes, let me go back to the single editor view here, and let's work out a few more links here that we can set up. So in the scene sheet, we can do two things now. We can have plot points, and we can assign character development points. So this is handy to say, well, my character grows over the arc of the story, and these are the points at which that happens. So you can click on that little icon here and say add character point for character. And I've got my Mary character and I've got my Dave character here, and what this scene means for either one of them. So perhaps I'm going to click Dave Lee, and I'm going to make a note here to myself what that development is. He grows as a result of getting fired from his job. So that's one thing that we can do. But then at the same time, we can say, also Dave Lee, we can say he is depressed because he can't break up with Mary, for example. And then you can track what's important about this. And if your story is kind of flat and you think, hey, that's because I haven't got the right character development points in this scene, and that's why this scene needs a little bit of work, and you can kind of work that out by looking at what's happening in the scene, and then you can see how useful the scene is. The same with plot points. So I can use and add a plot point here. I just go add a plot point, and in my case, Storyist creates this by itself, Untitled Plot Point 6, and I can say we've got the breakup already, so Dave is getting fired. And as a result, whatever happens. So make a note of that. Or you just click on this Untitled Plot Point number 6, which gets you to that plot sheet. And then you can say, this plot is about getting fired. And then summary is Dave is getting fired. We've got that already. And here we have a link back to the section sheet in which that happens. So you can click that, and then we're getting back to the actual scene or section in which this is taking place. So that's kind of how you can use it in regards to words. But the cool thing is also these things, currently we're in the text view up here, and there's nothing in the outline view. So outline view is not working for this for story sheets, but the storyboard view is. So if you click on that, then you've got that little index card again, which is something you can also use to take notes. But more importantly, you've got this other space here, and you can now put other things about that character or about that scene on here. So you can say, well, I don't know, the coffee shop has a lot of dragon fruits or whatever, and you can add pictures here and create a little mood board for that particular scene. Do you know what I mean? So there we go, and you can have lunch there, and I suppose if you had a cup of coffee, you can put that in, and I guess you can put the branding of the coffee shop in as well. So that's another good way of getting the mood down on paper and put something to remind you of what am I actually writing about in a centralized point. So those are the funky things about story sheets, that they can link back to other sections. I believe they can also link to the actual text. I just haven't quite worked out how to do that yet. But, there is a way. The Storyist manual at storyist.com has more on that. And of course, there's the user forums on the Storyist website at storyist.com, where you can ask these kinds of questions if you're working more with story sheets. So I think it's a great writing tool in your otherwise funky arsenal of writing tools already. Explore them and see if you like them and see if they improve your writing. For me, they're a good little help, and it's something that I haven't quite gotten into it yet, but I'm beginning to, and I think this is great for fiction writers and especially also for screenwriters as well. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you liked this video, in which case please share it with friends, family and total strangers, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I will see you in the next episode. Happy writing. Bye bye.